Wilson Bryan Key, another popularizer of the idea that your behaviour, your consumer behaviour, is being manipulated without your knowledge. He focused on a different idea, the idea of hidden pictures or hidden messages in pictures. And he's made a whole career out of selling books and giving talks about this. And he had the argument that if he could find these hidden messages in adverts, then they must have put them there because they work. They must be effective if he could find them, because otherwise they wouldn't bother. Advertising is a very competitive business. They keep track of all of the results of their marketing campaigns, so they have this evidence that putting these messages into their adverts must be working. Well, here's some of the pictures, the sorts of adverts that Brian Wilson Key says contain hidden messages. There are two in particular here, so I'll leave them up there for a moment to see, can anybody spot the hidden messages within these images? Okay. Now, if you can spot them, well, they're supraliminal because you're aware of them. So there's no problem. If you look at the camel's front legs, that area, what can you see there? Now I've drawn your attention to that area. What? Cigarette smoke? That's an interesting idea, because after all, this is a packet of cigarettes. So showing cigarette smoke might not be the subtlest way of changing your behaviour. No? Anybody? Anybody see anything there? There we go. Now this is supposed to be a male figure engaged in a sexual act with themselves. And this is supposed to make you think, if you're a man, I suppose, that these cigarettes have sexual connotations and will make you more potent if you smoke them. Okay? I don't think it looks like much at all. Maybe it's some sort of figure. It's got legs, but they're the camel's legs. Okay, so nobody saw that. It was clearly, if it is there, it's subliminal. We shall see now what happens to sales of Camel cigarettes in the locality. Let's look at the other picture here. Now, can anybody see what's in this picture? It's a man kneeling down. Sorry? I can't hear. He's blindfolded, and there's a guy standing next to him. And what's he holding? A gun. Now this, if you see the logo, is actually issued by that nefarious organisation, the BBC World Service. And the tagline in small there says, "News beyond your borders." Now this is not intended to be subliminal. You're supposed to notice the shapes in this picture, and it's a visual pun, because they've turned a geographical set of maps, borders and so on, to a picture of a terrorist with a hostage. News beyond your borders. So we have this man with a Kalashnikov or something, and a blindfolded man down on the floor. So you're intended to see this. It's not meant to be subliminal. But these are the sorts of tricky images. This one was done on purpose. The camel one, I think, is the class of thing where there isn't really an image there, but once you look for it, perhaps you can convince yourself that there is something there. But here are some that, if you go out on the internet, you'll find these are the ones that internet conspiracy theorists say really have got hidden images in. And they're often to do with those evil products, alcohol and tobacco. So this is an alcohol advert by the Puerto Rican rum company. saying, we spent thousands finding out what we already knew. White rum is smoother than gin or vodka. And it's got a big picture of a scientific experiment where they get people to drink white rum with a lump of ice in. But according to the internet, the ice cubes in this drink contain faces that are making distressed expressions like, oh. And the argument goes, if you are borderline depressed or anxious, then this hidden face will manipulate your emotions just to send you over the edge where you're desperate for a drink of rum. And so you'll reach out and go and get your Puerto Rican rum out of the drinks cabinet where you always keep it. Slosh a big tumbler, put the ice cube in and knock it back. It's supposed to increase your consumption of alcohol by lowering your mood, by presenting an emotional caricature in the ice cube. There was a big scare about a label that Bud put out on their ice beer, which is so tasteless they have to freeze it. And the label had a sort of holographic shimmery pattern on that probably looked great in nightclubs with all sorts of ultraviolet lights. But people decided that actually the label was also showing weird, spooky, depressing faces. And they argued the same thing. This is another example of people trying to depress vulnerable individuals' mood and tip them over the edge into needing a drink. So this is the level of argument supporting the hidden images message. And of course, it rests on the fact that when you look at these things, you can't see what they're talking about. Therefore, they must be hidden. And if you really, really look, then maybe you can make out a face. Here's a much more overt one from a cigarette advert. It's a bit dated now because cigarette advertising's been banned totally. But here we have your typical smoker. And the strapline says, if you got crushed in the clinch with your soft pack, try our hard pack. Benson and Hedges 100s. And a picture of some cigarette packets. And can anybody see anything scurrilous hidden in this image? Over 18s only, please. Ah. What did you just see? You don't know. I don't know what it is. I saw, but it made me laugh. What's he holding in his left hand? Apart from the woman. Can you see anything there now? What can you see? Well, it looks like just the play of light on the woman's back, doesn't it? Or does it look like an erect penis? Well, according to the internet, it looks like an erect penis. And like the camel advert, this is supposed to be, you don't notice it when you look at it, but subconsciously it conveys to you an image of sexual potency. And that makes you buy the cigarettes or have a favourable attitude towards the cigarettes. And of course, there's absolutely nothing else in this advert remotely sexual, suggesting that sexual potency or success is there. Not even if you got crushed in the clinch with your soft pack, try our hard pack. Nothing. So why would they bother putting a subliminal image in when the whole picture is already full of sexual metaphors and imagery? Again, is this really put there by the advertisers? Or is it just a trick of the light that once it's pointed out to you, you go, oh, how did they get away with that? So, in fact, almost certainly, it is just a trick of the light. All these faces in ice cubes, genitalia in adverts, are in the eye of the beholder. you don't see them until they're pointed out to you. And here I had a few giggles, but no one would admit, at least, to seeing anything in those images until I pointed it out, and then suddenly you could see what was there. And that seems to be the hallmark of a lot of these hidden graphics things. Maybe they're there, maybe they're not. Do they have an effect? Well, in the 80s, Vokey and Reed actually carried out a study to see if embedding messages within pictures could influence people's behaviour. So they intentionally went out and made some sets of stimuli and carried out an experiment. They showed people words embedded in pictures to work out what they could see. So the experiment they carried out, they hid the word sex or a nonsense string of consonant, vowel, consonant, known in psychology as CVC strings, because they're generally pronounceable, or nothing. They just had control pictures. And these were just holiday snaps, pictures of sort of landscapes and so on, and they'd use, wouldn't be in Photoshop in 1985, they probably would have actually touched them up themselves with sort of a crayon or something to hide the word sex or a nonsense string or nothing in the picture. They showed all these pictures to their participants. No one actually reported seeing the words. So we've done what the internet claims is done with the pictures. Nobody reported seeing them, so they're not above the subjective threshold. That's good. What about the objective threshold? Did they change behaviour? Well, when they were pointed out, then they could be seen. So there's some potential there. They weren't entirely invisible. Like the graphics I've shown you, once the words were pointed out to you, they could be seen. Then they sent their participants away and got them back 2 days later, and they showed them the slides they had seen mixed in with slides they hadn't seen, and they were asked to say, which of these slides had you seen before? Now the argument goes, if the word sex or the CVC string had attracted their attention, increased their processing, they would remember that picture better, because if they want to go and buy the product, they would have to remember the brand. So if this is going to work as an advertising technique, there should be better memory for the pictures that contained the word sex compared to the nonsense string, or certainly the controls. In fact, recognition was just the same, it was chance level, just the same as it was for the control slides. So embedding those words actually had no behavioural effect at all, no effect on behaviour. So they might have been below the subjective threshold, they were also below the objective threshold. So that's not going to be any use for advertising.